Hello everyone. So my name's Catrin, I'm the Press and PR Manager at National Theatre Wales. I was a journalist for 8 years before I did this job, so in fact I've been a journalist longer than I've been a Press and PR Manager. But don't let that put you off, because what I'm hoping to show you today is that thinking like a journalist and having a bit of empathy with how the media works will help you put across what your work is like. Like Rhian, I'm going to talk about a campaign as if you had a specific event or a show on to promote. I can talk to you later if you've got questions about specific, broadly about how you talk to the press about your work in general or your career. So 3 simple rules in theory, much like Rhian's, and I suppose it's Simon's as well. Firstly, to plan your campaign. Secondly, to plan your content. And thirdly, to put the 2 together and go. So starting with the first one. Thank you, Simon. Glamorous assistant. The first question, again, it's come up twice already, is what sort of person would you like to come and see your event? It sounds like an obvious question. The answer, everyone and anyone, will not do, because you'll be wasting your time if you try and reach everyone and anyone. But ask yourself, who is your target audience, if you have to call them that? Are they young? Are they old? Are they digitally savvy? Do they listen to the radio or not? Do they read the Telegraph or not? Try and think like them and try and think, who you're trying to tempt to try and come, who would enjoy it, and that's going to help shape your press campaign, as it would your marketing campaign. And bearing that in mind, what is it that you want the press to write or report about your show? It's quite tricky to put across something that's deeply personal to you, but try and think objectively and do think, what do you want the press to take away from it? What do you think might excite them? And who in the press would you like to do this? You may have a writer or a blogger or a critic that you already follow or whose judgment you really trust. Make a note of those and ask them. They'd love to hear from you. If not, if you don't have a press list of your own, you can always ask National to us. We've got a press list that is not ours. I can share that with whoever asks for it. And most arts venues do. Any arts venue, any arts company really exists to help promote the whole industry, if you like. So if you ask for help, you should be able to get it. So do contact me if you want a press list at all. This is a good one. Write a list of your event's assets. So if you're making a theatre production, your assets really are the people you're making it with. And there are ways in which they become assets that you may not have realised. So for example, you may have a director who's very camera shy and the thought of talking to a journalist terrifies them, they don't want to do it. So you think, okay, well I can't use that person. But maybe they're a really good writer. Maybe they'd be happy writing a column about the rehearsal process or how they make the show, or an essay or an article. Maybe they're happy speaking on radio, but they don't like talking in front of a camera. Other examples I can think of, or say you've got a costume designer whose last job was on a really big show that everyone's heard of. Then use her and ask if she'll do interviews, or if she'll share some images from the work that she's doing for you. So yeah, ask the people that you're working with about their background, where they're from, who they've worked with, and try and get an idea of how they might help you sell the show and talk to the press. Is it timely and relevant? That's a very good question as well. Unfortunately, that's quite a big way in which journalists think. They like things that are timely and relevant and they're happening right now. So if you're making a show that happens to fall into a centenary, or you're doing a Shakespeare play and your opening night is on what would have been his birthday, or anything like that, however trivial you might think it is, journalists really love a nice peg like that. So anything that you can say to them, look, this is really in the news right now. You may not seem it, but look, here's how I can show you it is. They'd love your help with things like that. What's different about it? That's fairly obvious, but again, journalists deal in the new. They want ideas for how things are different. How is your show different, and how could it? Are you making something that could definitely not have been made by anyone else, and if so, why? Good questions to ask yourself are: would you hold open rehearsals? If you're making a work of art, would you invite people to come in and watch you as you're making it, or rehearsals, or in any art form really? Are you happy to share your process, really? Some artists are, some artists don't. Will you have a press night? Some do, some don't. Maybe you think, the critics can come to anything. Some artists are quite open-minded about that. Some are petrified and think, no, I want the specific press night, and they can all come at once and we can get it over with. Think about that in advance and plan for that. And also brief your colleagues on your plans. Don't just think, I'll book her for an interview. do check with your costume designer and your lighting designer and your actors and who knows what, and just check they're happy to help you out. I'm sure they would be, because it's furthering their career as well, so they ought to. But do keep in mind what you're asking them to do as well. Thank you, Simon. So a press release. There's no great art to writing a press release, unfortunately, but I can give you 2 tips that I've picked up. The first is, the closer it can emulate an actual news story in the press, the better. It's a bit cynical, but in the end that's how journalists think. So, and they don't have time to read reams and reams of text. So if you write them a press release and the headline is really grabbing, then they may not even read beyond that. That's all it takes. So that's great. So the most newsworthy, exciting stuff at the top, and save the kind of detail for later on. Your biography, your cast's biography, all the kind of detail about where you buy tickets and what the dates and times of your performances are towards the end. Be as succinct as you can, but like I say, stick the most exciting stuff, and you have to be very objective about that right at the top. What else was I going to say about press release? The golden other rule about press releases is don't ever use adjectives that you can't back up or prove yourself. It's very easy when you're writing a press release about your own show to call it exciting, or moving, or hilarious. You would say that, you made it. So you have to think like a journalist who, again, sadly, they deal in facts. They're not really interested in opinions. They want hard facts about what the show is and how is it different. But there's ways around it. You can use adjectives that you can still back up. So, for example, if you're making a show that's completely new and original, call it new and original. Call it groundbreaking. If it's site-specific, call it that. If it's multi-platform, call it that. You can still give the impression of it being exciting and hilarious and moving, but just don't use those adjectives that are utterly meaningless, because their eyes will skim over it. I brought some examples of press releases with me, which I can share in the one-to-ones later on if you want to take a look at them. You might want to do other things with text. Like I say, if you're a keen writer, you can write a rehearsal diary. It's time-consuming, but it's a nice, handy way of keeping the press informed on what you're doing. Images are hugely important. Journalists, the first question they'll ask really is, do you have any pictures? Because it's very rare to see a news story or certainly a feature anywhere in print that doesn't have images. Even radio stations will ask you for a picture so they can put that up on their website. So images, if anything, I'd say are more important than the press release. And as Rian was saying, they don't have to cost the earth to make. You can take them on your iPhone these days. You don't have to hire a professional photographer, take them yourself. As long as each picture is 1 megabyte minimum in size, the press ought to be able to use it. Feel free, by the way, to ask a friend who's got a camera or who's studying photography to come in. You'd be surprised how many people will say, oh great, I've been looking for something to do. And make the most of your friends like that. Rehearsal images, production images. Production images are of the final event, with full costume and lighting and everything like that. Again, you don't have to do all of these. You can just do one, that's great. And images of yourself, it's easy to overlook that. But anyone who will be doing an interview, director, writer, costume designer, your cast, everyone, any pictures of them that they've got, you can use. It'll all help. And video, again. Sam and Louis won't like me saying this, but you don't have to hire a wonderful company like Trap to make a trailer for you. You can use your iPhones, or you can ask a friend to chip in. It needn't cost the earth, it needn't be very complicated, but the more content you make, the more you get out of it. Thank you, Simon. And then go. Don't be afraid to talk to journalists too early. Coming back to something I said earlier, there are artists out there who share too much, who talk about every single detail of their process. There are others who are quite shy and protective of their work. It's perfectly understandable to think, well, I don't really want to talk about it yet because I haven't finished making it. It might change on the day. Of course it will. Remember that journalists' actual work, their stuff that they print is all factual, and they do need a lot of hard facts. But the journalists themselves, they can deal with nuance, they will understand that. If you talk to them and have a proper conversation, they will understand, actually, can this bit be off the record? I'll update you later near the time, but for now I'm not sure if this is going to work. They will completely understand if you're honest with them about what works and what doesn't, and what's fixed and what isn't. And in fact, don't be afraid of them at all. It's easy to forget this, but without artists like you, arts journalists don't have a job. They wouldn't have anything to do. So they really, literally rely on you to come and tell them what you're doing. They'll be really grateful that you've got in touch, so don't be afraid of them. Email your press release and your images if you've got them to the journalist. Again, if you want help with a list of journalists, I'm happy to help. Give them a day or two to absorb it, and then maybe give them a ring. It's easy to just think, oh, I'll just email them again, but phone is much better. Give them a ring and ask them, did they get it? Have they read it? What do they think? Any other questions? Do you want to talk about it? Would you like to come into rehearsals? You know, sort of engage them in conversation a little bit about it. Send them as much content as you can as and when you have it, or offer it to them. And just keep in touch with them. Again, it's all to do with nuance. You don't have to just get in touch with them when you have a show to sell. Just keep in touch with them about, oh, like, this is an idea I'm working on. I may not do it in the end, but this is something I'm thinking of doing. That's fine with them. They like to know in advance, even if it's a year in advance, what you're doing. It's really valuable to journalists. Sounds like an obvious one, but do make a note of your reviews and all of your press content when it comes out. Sometimes in the kind of frantic heat of opening week, you may not remember to write it all down or make a note of all the reviews that you've got. They're all really useful, if not for this show, but maybe for the next show. Another top tip actually for me. Rian mentioned Google. You can set up Google alerts for free and very, very easily, if I can do it, anyone. So that what happens is every time your show is mentioned anywhere online, Google sends you an email to let you know that it's happened. That could be Twitter, that could be on Facebook, that could be a news story, that could be on radio even. And that's a useful way of keeping tabs of what people are saying about you without you having to trawl through lots of newspapers. Thank you. That is the lovely Robert Redford and the also lovely Dustin Hoffman. If you haven't seen All the President's Men, do. It's amazing. The reason I put it on there is not just because of Robert Redford's hair, but to show you that, sorry, I just get distracted, I can't. That newsrooms, modern newsrooms, have changed really very little since that. So that's 39 years ago now. And the press, the journalists, they still have very bog standard technical equipment. They don't use typewriters anymore, but their computers are not necessarily very quick and very big and powerful. So when I say create lots of content and send it to them, don't bombard them with loads of huge videos that crash their inbox and they get really grumpy and they never want to hear from you again. Always worth ringing them first and saying, look, I've got a great trailer for you. Do you mind if I share it with you? How do you want me to do it? Do you want me to email it to you? So I send you a link, that sort of thing. They're very busy as ever. They are tied to their desks. They don't have much time to go out and about, so you might need to go to them. And also, most importantly, journalists still use the phones all day. So you can email them till you're blue in the face, but really a phone call makes the world of difference. It's easy for journalists when they're busy to just ignore an email and think, I'll come back to it later, or I haven't got time now. If you phone them, it's harder for them to ignore you. They've got your absolute attention and you've got theirs. And they feel special, which is a very important thing. It sounds like you really do want that person to write something about you. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and chat to them. And that is it from me.